What's up everyone, it's ENDYMION, and I got quite a bit to cover today, from woke journalists attacking our very own with slanderous claims, Assassin's Creed Shadows getting caught so many times being culturally incorrect it's kind of insane, and the nonsense that is Concord's public beta as well. So let's begin. Firstly, let's talk Kotaku. You already know they're a dumpster fire of a website, and recently Kotaku Australia closed down because it was barely getting 1 million views per month, which is abysmal considering that site had multiple people on salaries churning out articles every day. Now the main Kotaku site has had one of its own decide to attack the white male gaming population, claiming we are the problem. From that Park Place, Kotaku managing editor goes on deranged rant accusing Mark Kern of maintaining and reinforcing the heteronormative, cisnormative, white supremacist, patriarchal status quo. These claims come from Caroline Petit, a transgender editor who works at Kotaku, and it's very nuclear what this person was spewing, to say the least. This all started because Mark Kern, or you may know him better as Grums, was responding to a Reddit post that I covered a few videos ago already. There was this anonymous game developer who went on Reddit to complain how they hate current age gamers because none of the players out there want to support wokeness, and it really upsets them. This ended up getting the attention of me, Grums, and others, which led to this now Kotaku editor attacking Grums for speaking on it. As Grums said about the Redditor developer via Twitter, "You hate gamers because you are obviously political and insist that everyone accept and love your overt political messaging in games. You want compliance and gamers aren't giving it to you." And Grums is right. The truth is simply that nobody cares what these activists want, because whatever they want is usually always the direct opposite of what the majority of people out there believe in or want themselves. They're simply mad that their games are flopping and their studios are closing. Suicide Squad, by the way, did so poorly Rocksteady is currently a support studio now. And their game is being given away for free via Amazon Prime, which for a game that is 6 months old as of the making of this video, that's goddamn abysmal, dude. This then led to that Kotaku editor Caroline Petit to respond to Grums by saying, "I've said this many times before, there is no way, shape, or form in which what people like Grummy here are doing is not itself deeply political. It's all about maintaining and reinforcing the heteronormative, cisnormative, white supremacist, patriarchal status quo." Caroline here is obviously extremely angry that Gamergate 2 has evolved into what it has become today, and there's no signs of it slowing down either. Stuff like Flintlock comes out soon, which is consulted by Sweet Baby, and that game is struggling for an audience. Then there's Tales of Kanzara Zal, which flopped as well, and devs got laid off from that studio too, which were, by the way, all white male game devs that were thrown to the curb, which was very interesting. And recently, we have the Concord public beta, which has had a mostly negative reception during its runtime. I actually tried Concord because I figured I should play the beta at least so I can give my honest take on the game, and to be frank, the game is ass. Obviously, I didn't buy it, the beta is free thankfully, but from what I played, I found it to be pretty middling and a very poor made first-person shooter. It feels and plays like a sluggish poor man's Overwatch with arguably some of the worst character designs I've ever seen in a video game this year. The maps are also like Overwatch, these very sterile looking maps that are devoid of personality or any flair. As for the characters themselves, for me anyways, I found Haymar, the Destiny Warlock-like Asian woman, to be the best character to play because she can just steamroll entire groups with her abilities. The game just feels incredibly imbalanced, and most matches have players playing the same core group of characters while ignoring the rest. Objectively too, the character designs are just terrible, like just look at some of these that I captured while I was playing it, they look awful. There's an old Asian grandma. There's some weird cardboard box headed thing that has they them pronouns apparently, and much more. This game is a Kotaku editor's wet dream, and if we look at the Steam version of Concord, there's just over 300 people playing the beta right now, which kinda tells you everything you need to know about this game, that it is going to be dead on arrival when it launches next month. This game is also $50 Canadian at launch. It should be free to play at the bare minimum if it even wants to somewhat compete with the juggernauts of the genre. But what's here is a game that feels very slow to play. Also, the game has no super abilities either, so there's no big show-stopping ways to turn the tides of battle. You just pick a character, fight, die, then switch if you need to, and that's it. It just feels so bare bones. Honestly, Concord feels like a tacked-on multiplayer mode that should have been attached to a game with a more robust single-player experience. If Concord was a single-player galaxy-trotting adventure where you hunt down aliens and explore ancient planets, with a group of weirdos, it could maybe be a fun Guardians of the Galaxy-like adventure. But instead what you have is this bare-bones multiplayer mode that offers nothing new besides a new cast of zany characters that either just look downright horrible or they cross that uncanny valley look like this weird cat alien thing that creeps me out whenever I look at it. But what Concord is pretty much is what Kotaku's editor is wanting you to play and support, and they're angry that Concord, Suicide Squad, Zao, Flintlock, and many others are or have already failed, and it's not because these games suck ass or offer anything actually new. But instead, the real reason they fail is because we are all sexist and white supremacists apparently. But PlayStation and Steam have huge audiences, surely they're not all white males, right? So why aren't your huge demographics of people of color supporting these games either? Could it be that they too are white supremacists, or that the stuff getting made these days does not resonate with anybody regardless of skin color or gender identity? As one user pointed out who responded to Caroline of Kotaku, the issue is those political ideas are not presented as an alternative but rather as a hostile takeover. And this user is exactly right. That's how these games feel, and editors like Caroline are mad because we are just not accepting it. Look, I want Sony to venture into some form of multiplayer, but the reality is I don't want to pay $50 for a gendered they-them first-person shooter that features stale gameplay and been there, done that game modes. Players want stuff that feels new. Helldivers was just that actually, and it had all the makings of being the next big live service game. But Arrowhead's moronic devs and community managers decided to ruin that game's reputation for wokeness, and now the game's audience has suffered because of that. So what are we supposed to do then? Support the slop just because people like a Kotaku editor tells us to? I say screw that, and it's not our fault if the products being made suck ass. We are the audience, we pay for these things and we keep them afloat. And if you are not giving the consumer what they want, you do not deserve sympathy or financial benefits simply because you wanted to make some garbage game that was made for absolutely nobody but your friends that live in San Francisco. Caroline would respond to that user saying it's a hostile takeover by stating, "Right, we're the hostile ones, asking to exist freely and safely as equals in society and sometimes see ourselves represented and reflected in the mediums we love. Patriarchy and white supremacy are themselves hostile and maintained through violence or the threat of violence. Nobody here said you can't exist. I don't care about you either way, to be honest, but the reality is that a game like Concord, or any of these other failures, they are being made for a very small demographic of potential players. And objectively, when it comes to AAA game development, you need hundreds of thousands of players in order to satiate your live service game models. As much as it is your right as a transgender individual to not want to play games that have straight white male protagonists, it is equally the right of people who are opposite of you to not want games featuring people like yourselves either. And ultimately, whether you disagree or not doesn't matter in the grand scheme of things because the free market will decide what gets made in the future and doesn't. If enough people who want pronounced Concord shooter games buys it and supports it, then maybe the game will thrive and more stuff like it will come. But I sincerely doubt that this is going to happen. If I had to wager, I would guess that Concord fails at release, gets heavily discounted a month or two after it comes out, and then by mid next year at the latest, Concord just joins PS Plus as a free-to-play game out of necessity in order to survive. And by the way, I don't think Concord would even do well even if it was free-to-play because the meat of this game is just underbaked across the board. Objectively, it just isn't good, and unfortunately many of these games, which are usually Sweet Baby aligned, they don't even review well for the most part out of a few exceptions like God of War Ragnarok. Caroline further doubles down by saying, when were we asked if we wanted to live in a racist, misogynistic, transphobic society that treats straight white male as the default setting on humanity? Look, Caroline, you're obviously someone who has drank the Kool-Aid, and is one of many woke liberals who has been brainwashed to hate their own skin color. I get it. White people are not the default. However, we have to admit that objectively there has been an agenda to erase white people from many aspects of society deliberately. If you need any evidence, literally, just watch anything I make pretty much. There's examples all over. And the same rhetoric could be swapped against you, and then you would just get offended. When was the ordinary hardworking consumer asked that they wanted to participate and exist in an openly anti-white male society that treats them like they are the devil? Doubly so if you live in some place like America or Canada too. Objectively speaking, your society that you function within has been largely built and sustained by white men. That's not racist, it just is true, and we all need to accept it. The internet, electricity, cars, even Twitter or X, all of this and more was designed by white men. To act like white men are somehow detrimental to society is complete lunacy and objectively incorrect. Without the contributions of white individuals, you would simply not be living in your current day comfort whatsoever. You just wouldn't. There's a reason why so many people come from other countries to live in places like America or Canada, because they are places that have largely been designed and propped up by the ingenuity of white men. I know some might think that's racist, but it isn't. It's simply the truth. If you didn't like how white men operated or created your leisure lifestyle where you can afford the time and energy to be upset about things like your they-them games failing, you would simply move to another country. But we all know that you and many others who think like you will never do this because deep down in your soul you understand and accept that the world that you live in is made easier and made more convenient due to the sacrifices and achievements of the very straight white males you claim to hate so much with all of your being. If white men societies were so awful, then nobody would be moving to North America, yet it's the exact opposite. Why isn't anyone moving in droves to places like the Middle East or Africa when compared to North America? I mean, if you want to go live somewhere where statistically there's less straight white males, you could go to those places, but will you? Of course not. Because then you couldn't bask in the conveniences that your so-called mortal enemies have created for you to enjoy. If anything, Caroline Petita Kotaku, you should instead be thankful of white men, otherwise your life wouldn't be as easy as it is right now. Plus, you work for a website that uses devices and stuff like the internet, also, by the way, made by white guys. So you'd be out of a job and unable to complain to begin with if white men never did what they did for society. Caroline finishes by saying another tactic for maintaining the dominance of the systems we live in is trying to render those systems invisible. And one way they do this is acting like you're some kind of loon when you point out that those systems exist. The same could be said about people like me, saying that there is an objective agenda to displace and ruin individuals like myself who are also white from participating in society. If I told this Caroline person that companies go out of their way to not hire white men, they'd look at me like I'm crazy. It's amazing how tone-deaf and socially out of touch this Kotaku editor is, considering there's someone who attempts to act like they are somehow working every day to push social justice themselves. It's truly amazing how incapable and moronic the woke weirdos are out here in today's world. Caroline, I will only accept your opinion once you stop using anything made by white men altogether. So once you have no car, no internet, no electricity, no computer or phone, no North American styled housing, and basic things like heating or cooling in your residence, then we can talk. But you see what I mean? Kinda sucks how much different the world would be if literally everything you rely on suddenly evaporated into thin air because the people you hate wouldn't exist, huh? This is the tolerant activist friends. Don't harass them or anything, but just view this individual as a cautionary tale of what happens when the mind virus eats away at your brain due to your environment around you. White men are not the devil. Maybe thank a white guy when you see one for making your country so easy and nice to live in next time you see one. And speaking of being crazy and delusional, we have Ass Creed Shadows. I already hate this game and it's not even out yet. Now it turns out there's a lot of fake stuff going on behind the scenes, and they are getting called out like crazy, dude. So as many sites are reporting, the Japanese government is looking into Assassin's Creed Shadows after many claims have come forward about the game being completely, historically inaccurate. This is like Netflix Cleopatra, but somehow worse. One Japanese politician by the name of Satoshi Hamada is spearheading this, saying that Shadows will be brought before the Japanese Diet. which is the country's legislative body. This is due to, as Hamada says, for altering the country's history, architecture, and more, as well as potentially using artificial intelligence to generate images of the time period the game is supposed to be set. As Hamada states via Twitter, request for opinions, we have received a consultation regarding the alteration of Japanese history by a French game company. We share the consultation below with images. We also quoted a post that we believe points out the problem with the game in question. We would be happy to receive your comments and suggestions, including specific requests. So Hamada is compiling everything Shadows is allegedly getting wrong in order to bring it to the Japanese government because of how poorly it is being depicted and pushed as fact. There was also this one post by Assassin's Creed France where they posted a bunch of images promoting Shadows, to which one user said, "The characters written on the base of the sword are from the esoteric Buddhism, a branch of Buddhism. Why is Yasuke, a black man who is not a Buddhist, following Buddhist beliefs?" As if this wasn't bad enough, people quickly realized that the props Ubisoft was using to promote Shadows weren't actually authentically made for the game either. In fact, users quickly discovered that pretty much everything Ubisoft was using for promotion were items you could easily buy on Amazon yourself right now. Meaning Ubisoft was just using random Japanese-looking items to make their social media posts look more authentic than they really were, as if the Buddhist stuff was bad enough. Another user pointed out that Ubisoft illegally stole the design of lanterns from Todaji Temple, a real location in Japan, and that the public relations officer who was attached to this temple would be seeking further investigations into AC Shadows as this was used without consent. Other designs were also illegally stolen by Ubisoft, as another user points out here, stating that these designs were never given consent to be used within Shadows, and that many of these designs were actually made by their own relatives and Ubisoft never once contacted them for use. It gets worse somehow as well, because Twitter users then pointed out that Ubisoft was using a katana, and this is crazy, a katana from the anime One Piece to promote Shadows. As this user points out, Ubisoft very clearly uses Shueisha's One Piece IP and the katana of Roronoa Zoro to promote Shadows, and they tried to pass it off as Yasuke's in-game katana. I wish I was kidding, but this is how incompetent Ubisoft is these days. Also, that stand in the image that they used, yeah, that's the same stand that Zoro's sword sits upon in One Piece, and users found out that Ubisoft just bought the stand off of Amazon as it's a one-to-one copy of the product being sold as seen here. Here's another image of Yasuke's katana, which is actually Zoro's from One Piece, that you can buy right now on Amazon. Even the little geisha figurine can be bought via Amazon too, as seen here. Also, Ubisoft has recently apologized for using a Japanese historical reenactment group symbol within Assassin's Creed Shadows as well. And I just want to say that all of these issues that are being brought up, as well as how characters are collecting rice in Shadows when the cherry blossom trees are in bloom, which means that Ubisoft also doesn't understand seasons and how they operate within Japan, this is all from pre-release footage. I can only imagine the inconsistencies that will be found once the game actually comes out in full. They're also using the wrong floor mats, door designs, and Yasuke is far too close to Oda Nobunaga in the debut CGI trailer. A samurai would never be that close to their lord in a meeting like this. It genuinely looks like Ubisoft did next to no research when it came to making Shadows. They just looked at Japan, saw Yasuke, and went, "This is our ticket to high ESG," and that's it. Manga Lawyer on Twitter also detailed how one author named Thomas Lockley has been accused of altering history in order to sell his own books. And it turns out that in 2015, an academic paper on Yasuke was edited by a user called Totori Tom, which would eventually be renamed as Thomas Lockley in the future. Users then found out that Lockley intentionally edited historical information on Yasuke himself to pass it on as fact. This then would lead to Lockley's book called African Samurai: The True Story of Yasuke, a legendary black warrior in feudal Japan. Many users flooded Lockley, especially on Facebook, accusing him of appropriating Japanese culture in order to sell a fabricated lie to customers by spinning a story that wasn't based on historical facts. This led to Lockley claiming that he would lock his account and was seeking sympathy for the backlash, but it seems very likely as of now that Lockley lied, manipulated a ton of information, and then sold a story to people in order to financially benefit from it. And the majority of Yasuke within Shadows, by the way, is based on the works of Thomas Lockley himself. Meaning that yes, ultimately as it stands right now, Yasuke in Shadows is genuinely based on the fabricated works of a woke white guy who played everybody for money. And this all proves that AC Shadows is indeed a lie based on further lies being pushed by a bunch of woke individuals who are trying to change history to fit an agenda, and it is beyond disgusting. This is the future that people like Caroline of Kotaku is pushing, by the way, where reality and objective truth blur until nobody can reasonably tell the difference anymore. It's the perfect playground for a woke liberal activist if you ask me. But it's clear that none of this is helping since Concord is already failing, Kotaku is going to die soon, mark my words, and Shadows is such a disaster it's honestly incredible at this point. Can Ubisoft stoop any lower? The answer is yes, by the way, they absolutely can. I can't wait for Shadows to come out, not because I want to play it, but I just want players to comb through that world and find all the mistakes so we can all laugh together. But I think that's enough for today, so let me know what you think as always. Subscribe, share, thanks to my patrons, and remember that my memberships are now live if you want to support the channel. Have a wonderful day, everybody, and I'll see you in the next one.